Welcome, Bitcoiners. Welcome. Happy end of the Easter weekend. Let me make sure I'm all loaded up here. Good morning, Rickster, Swixter, Fusion. Oh my God, I'm catching it live this time. Well, I'm glad you did. This is a good one to catch live. This is going to be one of the best ones ever. There's a lot going on. We got extra fake news today. Extra fake. Daniel, sun, coffee. Time for talking about what's new. Sun's up, yes, Tom. Indeed, the sun is up. Indeed, indeed. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Hello, B for victory. Hope you're doing well. Bomatatus. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone had a wonderful weekend. Indeed, I do hope everyone had a wonderful weekend. I did. I went for a little sail yesterday. I have never sailed around the island that I'm on, and someone invited me yesterday for a little day out, and it was a good time. I snorkeled in some reefs and went into some sunken ships around. It was great. It was great. I don't love swimming. I'm not a big swimmer. I like going in the water, but I don't like going for a long swim. So it was a long swim for me yesterday, but that's fine. David, good morning, David. Good morning. Jivi says, good morning, back on Midwest time. Great, 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 great. I'm going to see you soon, Justin. I'm going to see you soon. I've already put you into the agenda for Bitcoin 2023. I'm not sure you're aware of that, but Matt Odell was a nominator of you, and it's a good session. I think you're going to like it. Good morning, Kevin. Good morning, Kevin. Good morning. Wow, there you go. Yeah, the follower count is going up. Thanks, Andy. I like it too. I'll be on Wednesday. I'm not sure when it comes out, but I'll be on What is Money with Robert Breedlove. I will be recording on Wednesday, and I think that'll help my follower count. I still haven't done like a main, I've done a few of the Friday shows with our good friend BTC Sessions, but this will be a pretty good one. So I think it'll go well. We'll be talking all about psychological engines. I hope my what is money definition is helpful. Good morning. Good morning, Robert. Good morning, Robert. Good morning, Joe. Good morning, Smithereen. So let's just get started here. The sun is up this morning, guys. It rose like it did every day. Bitcoin running great as it has for the last, what are we at now? 14 years? Going to be 14 years coming up this year. And all that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. Where Do I Sat says, yeah, it's going to be a good one. Thanks, Where Do I Sats. I think it'll be a good one. I think it should be able to get us to the book release YouTube subscriber number. So there you go. I think it'll happen quick. Good morning from Alberta. We love Alberta. Alberta's the best. Huh? Alberta. I'm going to try and get a little Bitcoin thing going at Stampede this year, by the way, guys. I failed last year. The Luna thing, the collapse of Luna, more or less took away my ability to get a headline speaker for Stampede, which is in July. It was like 2 weeks later, and so I just gave up. But I'll do it this year. I want to get in touch with the Canadian Cattle Ranchers Association. I'm told they're based Bitcoiners and not interested in propagating the grocery store cartel. I was not aware of that. I was worried they were grocery store cartel people, but I'm told on good authority they are Bitcoiners and are interested in Texas Beef Initiative type stuff. So we will be looking to get them involved. Now let's get the fakest Muscat time. There's some great ones today. This is awesome. It looks like they're lining up here. So New York Times first. The headline is El Salvador decimated its ruthless gangs, but at what cost? At what was the cost? In the year since El Salvador declared a state of emergency, the government has decimated the gangs. They say it almost longingly. Oh, they've decimated the gangs. First of all, let me take an issue here. These stupid New York Times. Do you know what decimated means? It means down by 1/10. Everyone uses it wrong. It's not just the New York Times, but you'd think the New York Times could get this much right? Decimated means 1/10. Let's do a correction right now. We'll let them go on the rest of the fake news, but decimated means down by 1/10. I said, everyone misuses it. They should say the truth. He annihilated, he destroyed, he removed. That's not decimated. Decimated is 1 in 10. And decimation comes from the Romans for that reason. They would decimate, right? Which means cull by a tenth. So yeah, it's from the Romans. It's nothing to do with destroying and annihilating. He annihilated. So let's get the proper use here. Decimated, down by 1/10. He annihilated. More accurate. But this is the best. This is the best. It gets even better. So the government decimated the gangs that once nearly ran the country, but the tactics used may have a lasting cost, sacrificing civil liberties for safety. The New York Times. This is the New York Times, guys. They're now doing the way off. What does it mean to give up a bit of freedom for these civil liberties you talk about, right? Now they're curious. Now they're interested in the trade-offs, right? Now the trade-offs are a big deal. Thank you, New York Times. But it's not just the New York Times. As we know how the system works for the centralized broadcast cartel that's out there, and Glenn Greenwald has mentioned this many times, the New York Times actually just gives marching orders. So the New York Times says something, then everyone knows it's okay to say it. So they say, Bukele, what about the balance? What did they give up? What did they give up? Right? Vox. Here, they take it to the new level. This is awesome. And this is everything we've been predicting, right? The final battle of World War III is the wokes and the Bitcoiners. And here's the transition. They're moving it quickly, right? They're moving it quickly. So what did they give up? New York Times is asking. Vox, downstream of the New York Times machine, asks, meet the MAGA movement's new favorite autocrat. Meet him. The American right is falling in love. We're falling in love with El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele, over his crime crackdown. We're falling. I can't even read this stuff out loud. But he's tearing down Salvadorian democracy. Zach Beauchamp wrote this. This is all this weekend. This is real. This is real. So the MAGA movement's new favorite guy. And Clifton Duncan asks, given the past 3 years, it's incredibly rich that the New York Times, and in this case Vox, suddenly pretends to care about trading civil liberties for safety. Zuby responds, and in this case, it's real safety, not pretend. Pretend. So good. Here's the best two from the article. The catalyst for the new reality emerging in El Salvador was a weekend rampage by criminals in March of last year that left more than 80 dead. I love the ominous, the new reality. The new reality. A reality in which citizens feel much safer and overwhelmingly support their president. So the good news is Vox got fact-checked on this because they called him an autocrat, right? Of course, he's democratically elected. I mean, what do you want, right? He's democratically elected. So there you go. This is great. This is what we're talking about every morning here. We're talking about how inevitably World War III is going to end up with a recast of the heroes and villains. Heroes and villains are changing as we speak. And it's going to be the Bitcoiners, I think, are going to have to bear the responsibility for all the MAGA stuff, for all the January 6th stuff. It's everything. They're going to throw it all at us, which is great. We love it. We love it because things are changing quick, right? The heroes and villains are indeed changing quick. And you can tell that the current U.S. administration is having trouble keeping up, right? They're having trouble keeping up. So now they're going to launch, this is from the New York Times as well, a lot of people talking about it. They're going to launch a new social media army, right? A social media army. And it's going to be like bloggers, I guess. Sticks, X, and Hammer put it perfectly. He said he put up a meme of the smooth brain meme, smooth brain, right? Smooth brain. And he says, Biden's influencers in a nutshell. Free speech, private property, ? Rational Wiki has a page on you, dirtbag Nazi. The smooth brain, right? So good. Thank you, Sticks, X, and Hammer. War Clandestine, we're going to talk about him later too, says, the Biden admin wants to build a social media army to compete in the information war they are now losing. They are 6 years too late. While the left grew comfortable when they controlled the machine, we were building an army. We got organized, we got smarter, and we got better. Indeed, Bitcoiners have been doing this for a while now, and I don't think any New York Times hit piece, and there is one, right? There is a New York Times hit piece on Bitcoin from the weekend. Lots of people talking about it. It's all to do with the mining research that they said they were doing this big hit piece. They interviewed Nick Carter. They managed to give one quote from him about how, just to show that it's fake. Somewhere in whatever they had recorded, Nick must have said Bitcoin doesn't use fossil fuels anymore, and so that was the quote, right? As if Nick Carter doesn't really know what's being used to mine Bitcoin. So another one of these unbelievable failures on the part of the New York Times. Christian, joining us a little late. We've been talking here about the fake news from the New York Times about Bukele this weekend, and Vox following it up and mentioning the mining research piece that went into it. So again, I think at this point, most Bitcoiners are inoculated. We're vaccinated against the New York Times. So right away, when they drop one of these things, it just turns into people dissecting it. And exactly as War Clandestine mentions, we've already built an army that doesn't sit around waiting for what the New York Times says. Now, just think about how much the world has changed. 10 years ago, a New York Times hit piece meant you're done. You're finished. And things have changed so much that it means I have material now for Moscow time. That's all it is. That's the reach of their effect now into the world of Bitcoin, is I get content from Moscow time. So I say keep it coming, right? I need the content from Moscow time. I need these things. I can't have it the same day about eating bugs, even though those ones are always good. The bug ones will always work, right? But you got to mix it up. You can't just talk about how eating bugs and not exercising is actually really healthy, right? You don't need exercise. Eat bugs. Those ones are great, but these ones can be better. So I don't think this social media army that they're going to create is going to be effective. I mean, and it goes right into what I was talking about with some friends on the boat yesterday. When I talk about homeschooling, when I talk about what's going to happen in the economy in the future, jobs, people are very concerned about all this stuff. What I always say, though, especially when it comes to educating my kids and what I'm preparing them for, I always say, well, I'm not preparing them for college, right? That's not what I'm doing. If they want to go to college, if there's such a thing, great, right? But what I'm really trying to instill in them is a self-motivated and self-directed plan each day, right? So that they can, now I give them things to do and all that stuff, but in general, I want to make sure I've cultivated enough interest and enthusiasm in a subject that they jump right in. Because in the future, the people who work, right? I'm not predicting material need and want. I'm not predicting a world of poverty. I am predicting a world where not as many people have what we would think of as jobs today. And that calculation really suggests that it's because the people who do the work that's necessary are going to be so good at it and so efficient and so productive that they're going to take up the slack for everyone else. So other people will have, basically time to enjoy the world and enjoy, trying to be a better person. I guess that'll be the main task for most people. But the ones that do have jobs, and the reason why self-motivated is going to be the necessary ingredient to being gainfully employed in the future, is simply because those people who are self-motivated are going to be the ones you have to compete against, that everyone has to compete against. And if you're self-motivated, of course, it's much more efficient, much more productive. You get way more done. And those folks are going to have a tremendous advantage. And the folks who, it's a job, they've been assigned to do it, are never going to be. And that's really what we see in media today. If you're working for some of these institutions, if you're working for the New York Times, if you're one of these bloggers that the White House is hiring, what are they paying these people? The army, right? Are they all making a good salary? Are they all making enough money? Maybe. But it doesn't compete nearly with one Matt Taibbi working on Substack. It doesn't compete nearly with one person who's able to grow an audience organically and share their actual ideas, not the ones that are, second degree downloaded shades of reality, like this Vox headline, right? About MAGA movement's new favorite autocrat, right? So there you go. There you go. So now, when it comes to the cast of characters, right, media propagating who's motivated, whatnot, one of the things that we're seeing right now through the fog of war, through the changing times, and even this transposition that I've been talking about for a while, it's not left and right. It's not going to be Republican and Democrat. World War III that's not the formula, right? The formula, I think, in the end is going to be woke versus Bitcoin. The woke people who are still getting programmed, still getting talking points, still getting marching orders, versus those people who are self-motivated. So it's the same scenario for employment that I see playing out in terms of what the narratives are around World War III and how we get out of that. So, um, yeah, talking about the yeah, we'll talk about that a bit today. I don't have that on my notes. I talked about it on Saturday a little bit. It's a story to watch. I don't think it's as simple, but I've always been on Substack. I've always liked. I subscribe to a few there. One I pay quite a bit for. The others I sort of read the preview and all that, but I do spend a lot of time there. But here's the thing about heroes and villains and how quickly things are changing. Right, back on that subject. So this weekend, one of the big stories that isn't foreign affairs, that isn't World War III, that isn't the stuff we're going to keep talking about today, France and China and America and Biden and Trump and all this stuff. One of the big stories this weekend was from the box office, from Hollywood box office, right? And it turns out that Super Mario Brothers broke the all-time record for opening weekend box office for an animated movie, beating Disney's Frozen 2. I guess that was the biggest cartoon opening weekend ever. And now, one of the things that's funny about this, and I think funny, is that for years now, Disney has been using as an excuse, oh, COVID, the market isn't hot anymore. People are trained not to go to the movies. They just want to stay at home and eat popcorn and watch our movies from home. And we got to rethink what we're doing. And that movie got a bad box office because, right? There's always, especially with the Marvel movies, they've been excusing them for a while. They've released several animated movies since the pandemic. There was this awful one with Canada. My kids are banned from watching it. It like vilifies a mother who turns into a red panda or something ridiculous. And there's the Buzz Lightyear movie, big failure. Hold on a second. The Buzz Light, the failure after failure they've had now of money losing films. So there was a big push against Super Mario in the days leading up that it was racist because it only had white voice actors. And you even had John Leguizamo, who was the physical character of, I guess, Luigi maybe in the 1990s movie, like human life movie, real life movie that they made. And he was saying, I'm boycotting because there's no Latin. He used the words Latin X. He's one of the only people that I've ever seen use it in the wild, Latin X. But remember, Mario and Luigi are Italian. Latin X. They're Italian, right? They're Japanese characters based on Italian stereotypes. And people here are seriously wondering about representation. So John Leguizamo said he was going to boycott going to the movie because they missed an opportunity to put Latin voices. Well, maybe. I mean, I want like accurate voices and accurate portrayals for sure, right? No, I don't have a problem with that. But they're Italian. They're not Mexican. They're not from Puerto Rico. They're not Puerto Rican or Cuban plumbers. They're Italian plumbers. They're Italian plumbers. So, I mean, if someone would complain about the lack of Italianness in the movies, okay, I got you, right? But Latin, because their name is Mario and Luigi. I mean, you know how many Marios we have in Quebec? He was named Super Mario. He was a hockey player. Mario Lemieux, right? Mario the Best, as you would translate it. Mario is a very common name. Romeo is a common name in Quebec, in French places, right? All of these kinds of Italian names. So what's going on here, right? But the funny thing is, because Super Mario Brothers broke the record, you had all kinds of people sort of cheering that on, right? Because it was one of those things, just like the story of now Bitcoiners are MAGA people because we like Bukele, right? We're all MAGA now, right? It's the same thing. They were tarring an audience base and was saying, don't go see this movie, right? And now you wonder, Disney just absolutely failing. All their excuses sound hollow. At the same time, before the weekend started, they decided to put out a new like Star Wars movie roadmap, and they've resuscitated the least popular character, and they're going to make a movie about Rey Palpatine. So I'm done. Like I will never watch another Star. I tried to keep going and watching a little bit. There's some stuff I just wouldn't watch that was Star Wars because it got really bad. But at this point, if there is no anything coming, I'm done. Like I was already kind of done, but I'm really done now. Like don't care about Star Wars. It's trash, trash, which is hard to say, right? Because I loved Star Wars growing up. I thought George Lucas's movies were amazing, but they're unwatchable now. The new stuff is unwatchable, like unwatchable. And now that they're doing this, you gotta wonder. And as an accelerationist, people keep calling me an accelerationist. I guess I am. And it's a little bit like with the Trump getting arrested thing, right? The first moment I heard of it, I was like kind of angry that America had fallen that far in their political uh, arrests and all that. But very quickly, my idea turned, and I went, "Wait a minute, arrest him, please do it. Like this is great. This is I can't. I want to watch. I want to see this. I want to see how stupid people can be." And go ahead and do this because I'm waiting for it, right? It's an accelerationist thing, of course, but at this point, why not, right? And it's the same thing. I can't wait for Disney to lose more money. Just keep losing money. Just make the dumbest movies you can think of. I want to cheer on. I'm not waiting for Disney to make a better movie. I don't care. I want the worst movies possible out of Disney for as long as we can get them. I want them to be so woke and try and push this stuff so much and just not understand the feedback loop because that is eventually their punishment, right? Just to lose a bunch of money and to make shows that no one cares about and let everyone else, now Sony, with the Super Mario Brothers thing, eat their lunch. Because the problem with they tried to go at this with a Super Mario Brothers movie, that there was Me Too stuff with Bowser and Princess Peach, and that Princess Peach doesn't have enough agency as a female character because she's just waiting to get rescued all the time by the brothers. It's a video game. It's a video game. And it wasn't woke enough, right? And now, of course, people have shown that they don't give a shit about any of that and have gone for it. So just like when you first see something like they're going to make another shitty Star Wars movie, you're like, oh no, at this point, let it go. Let it go. Let's make Rey Palpatine times 5. Let's make a 5, not even a trilogy. Let's just keep making these movies that no one cares about, no one wants, no one asked for, no one wants to see, no one's ever going to see. And I hope they lose hundreds of millions of dollars each time because in the end, right? It's even why there is an idea around shitcoins being a beneficial thing to Bitcoin, and accelerationists kind of like it because it just burns fiat money. No Bitcoiners are buying this shit, right? It's people who are like, oh, I want to make money and I'm going to transfer all my stuff there. Let them do it. Let them burn. Ethereum isn't a big enough scam yet. We need to grow the Ethereum scam so that it topples all of Wall Street. It's the same thing as hoping for Disney to make a million shitty Star Wars movies. We want all the shitty Star Wars movies. We want as many as we can because it can actually sink Disney. It's actually bad enough that it can sink Disney, right? So you want to grow them. You want to grow them. Yeah. On Decimate, I didn't know you'd said something bodacious. Yeah. Anyway, so there you go, right? And when you see this, it's the same as the New York Times. 10 years ago, I would have never thought Disney was a negative force and could be counted as a villain in the narrative battle that we're in, and the psychological war we find ourselves in, and the psychological and economic war we find ourselves in, that is World War III. And now that they've been exposed for who they are, now that they or not even about exposed who they are. Now that we've seen the corporate rot that's in there, the lack of feedback, the ego, right? That's really what this Rey Palpatine thing, as far as I can tell, is all about. It's ego of producers that can't admit they're out of touch, that can't admit they lost the magic, they don't know how to make things. They can get it back, but probably not that cast of characters. You probably need new producers, new talent, new creative people in place to be able to make this stuff happen, but they're incapable because of contracts and studios and egos. And so here you are, they're making shows. And the reason, if you don't know, the person who is in charge of Lucasfilm over at Disney. Is some people say Ray Palpatine is like a kind of a vanity project. It's like how it's the producer's first character that she created through her reign at Disney after buying it from George Lucas. And she worked under George Lucas all the time in Lucasfilm. So now that she's got the reins, she makes her own character who just steals everything from Luke Skywalker and has never really achieved anything. And that's why everyone's furious, because the new shows are going to be about her doing the things that Luke Skywalker was supposed to do in previous books, which I read, which I thought were not great, but nevertheless had some stuff there to work from. So remember the heroes and villains part, right? Because and you know, even as I said, the idea of accelerationism with Wall Street, the idea of arresting Trump. You know, Trump went to the UFC this weekend. There was a big UFC fight in Miami. I don't know if anyone saw it, right? So the big UFC fight, all kinds of people there. Joe Rogan is on the mic and he's introducing everyone. It's got all the attention. UFC has really become a huge cultural gathering point, right? People seem to be from all walks of life watching this now and enjoying it. And, you know, who strolls in, right, with 40 whatever counts of felonies on his ass? Trump, right? Trump cruises into the arena. The crowd goes wild. They love him. They love him. One guy wins his fight, right, and points out to Trump and says, you know, that's the greatest president ever. You know, so glad you're here. Then he gets the whole arena to sing the "Let's Go Brandon" chant. Let's go Brandon, in the whole arena, right? So again, the idea that you can hire some social media influencers to start reshaping narratives around all of this stuff is laughable, because the machine is broken and it doesn't work the way they had anticipated. They have no longer any predictable control over shaping people's opinions, and things are flying out of their hands. You can see it in this next story, right? And this is the one about all of the espionage. So those leaked documents we talked about the other day. Remember the leaked documents that were on the, I don't know, it wasn't World of Warcraft. I said it the other day. It was that video game Discord server, and they've been there since early March, and people just found them, and they have all kinds of data on casualties. There is several copies flying around the internet, so the numbers are difficult to discern, right? So who lost whom, but it looks clear that the Ukrainians are disproportionately losing soldiers and don't have replacements. So what we see from those documents is Americans are indeed supplying some form of more than just resource and tactical support, maybe even some human beings. And that's been sort of hidden. Now, I don't quote me on that, right? Remember, everything I say about Ukraine and Russia, you need days to confirm it, right? Days. And I'm not here to confirm that stuff. That we're not a morning show that wants to find out details on the Ukraine-Russia war, because it's filled with propaganda, it's filled with psychological operations, it's filled with mischievous lies on all sides. Now, there probably are good resources out there. We're just taking it from one step back and trying to look at the things that we know to be true, which are not always a lot. But this is something we know to be true because we're just looking at the documents that have been released and what people are saying about them. So here's the interesting thing. Both the Washington Post and the New York Times ran a very similar article that looked like this. Intelligence leak exposes U.S. spying on adversaries and allies. So one of the points is that it showed what's going on, for example, in Israel, that Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency that definitely conducts psychological operations, has actually been behind some of the cultivation of protest in Israel these days. That's something that was sort of taboo to say. That's something that Iran used to accuse Israel of, that Mossad would work against their people for domestic political affairs. It seems to be true from these lab leak documents. Those aren't the doctored data numbers that we're talking about. Now, again, I don't know if it's true. I'm just saying that in my exposure to this leak so far, it looks true. It looks true. Because it's not one of these data things. It's part of a wider set of arguments and contemplations and discussions, and it looks like it. But here's the interesting thing about the articles, right? So the articles, in order to not just come down heavy on the amount of lies that are definitely proven out of this document release, out of this leak, the amount of lies that are swept away by saying, okay, well, America, yeah, they spied on some of their friends. It's not so cool. But look what they've got. The whole point of these articles is to say that it looks like we've got a mole that lets us know everything that's going on in Russia, which might be true. But that's the point of these articles that they publish. They don't mention really the details of any of the stuff about casualties, any of the information about their lying. They just show, oh, they're spying on these folks, and they're really good at spying on the Russians. They're really good at spying on the Russians, right? And that is more or less the whole point of the articles. Absolutely not dealing with the situation at hand, diverting it to these other issues. Michael Tracy comments on that. And even if you get into the comments, right, everyone's freaking out. It's treason because we said here on Saturday, just 2 days ago, that it looks like there is a leaker inside of the intelligence agencies. And we talked about how that's a sign the thing is coming down, right? When you start to get these kinds of leaks, you're dealing with internal change, subterfuge, and all these other things that we've predicted here. We said are going to continue. Not everyone involved in these secret spying agencies in America are on the side of the villains. Some are on the side of the heroes. Some are in between, right? It's not a monochromatic group of people working in one direction, which is kind of why the whole thing is coming apart. No one is working in the same direction in the American administration. Everyone is divided along the lines that we can see in the MMA fight, right? You get a whole crowd of people screaming, "Let's go, Brandon." You get people in the street saying that. You get other people saying, "Lock him up," everywhere, right? The degree of division because of the psyops are forcing other institutions to grind to a halt simply because they're caught up in the same spinning vortex of fighting, right? So that's what's happening. Michael Tracy here says, top New York Times commenters infuriated. They were just able to read an article in the New York Times about the government's secret warfare and espionage operations. Shouting treason, they denounce freedom of speech and call on the press to conceal the leaked documents on behalf of the government. And he has a screenshot of all these other things, of all these people in the commenters. And it's pretty chilling stuff. It's exactly what Glenn Greenwald has predicted, right? That the people who read this stuff always revert to demanding censorship of arguments they don't like. That's just become a reflex now, right? And people saying the answer to Michael Tracy, but the New York Times published the government documents. They did not, right? Glenn Greenwald corrects him. No, the New York Times did not publish these documents. They were published by unknown sources on the internet. The New York Times is only writing about the various government claims about who did it. Who falsely told you the New York Times published these documents? They lied to you. Indeed, it's just stuff like, oh, they have information on these people, but they're also really good at getting information from Russians. Like that's the main article. Look, they get information from Russians, right? That's the main article. So there you go. Again, this is, sort of turning this heroes and villains story on its head. It's reshaping who we think of as villains, who we think of as heroes, what are heroic acts, what are villainous acts. And I think the next one we're going to cover here, the RFK Jr. story and everything that he's starting to provoke, is going to help change that drastically. And this comes from an interview that Daniel shared with me on the weekend, and it was Roger Stone. You guys know who Roger Stone is? Roger Stone is the guy they arrested. It's live on CNN. They had the FBI SWAT team go in with the guns and everything. And he's the one they got. Apparently, he was the one in contact with Julian Assange about the WikiLeaks. But if you didn't know, Roger Stone has been around forever. He worked for Nixon. He has a great big tattoo of Nixon on his back. I've cited him before here as the person who has the proof and has written the story about how LBJ killed JFK and how and why and what was the context and all of those things. So this guy, Roger Stone, a very eccentric character, an interesting and neat guy unto himself, was this weekend thinking about the RFK nomination and what it means. And here's what he said. Basically, he said the Democrats will cheat no matter what in the primary, the proof being the Bernie Sanders show, which we all recognized at the time, and I've mentioned many times here, is proof of the appetite for cheating and steamrolling electoral politics. Now, the Democrats don't have anything like the Republicans when it comes to the nomination process, right? They don't have Iowa caucuses. They don't have the New Hampshire primaries. They don't have these organic ground level things that can't be manipulated from the top down. All of these systems, if you remember, I think there was even in the Iowa thing last time around, they had spun it for Biden to win, and a lot of people thought it should have been Bernie. And Roger Stone says in that interview he knew Bernie was a scammer because of the way he took it in the Hillary Clinton campaign. Remember, Trump in 2016 used to say, Bernie, stand up for yourself. They stole it from you. Come on. Just let everyone know you got robbed. Bernie got robbed twice and just stood by and let it happen, right? For the sake of the party and the sanctity and da-da-da. But he's not even in the party. He's a Democrat socialist. He's technically not a Democrat, right? He is registered in a separate thing altogether. But nevertheless, he let it happen, went along with it, which is how you know that the 6 houses and the Mercedes and the car and all the communist shit is bullshit. He's a total phony, right? I think anyone who's from Vermont knows he's a phony. We all saw the career. We all saw the results. I think a lot of us knew beforehand, phony baloney. But now it was obvious after how he went along with the Democratic National Commission for its electoral management of the 2016 primaries and 2020 primaries, both of which he should have won. He should have won both. It wasn't even close as far as I can tell. He should have won both. So Roger Stone mentioning that no matter what, RFK is not going anywhere. He's going to create a stir, but the party will cheat and lie and steal and make sure he doesn't go anywhere. So Roger Stone ends up backing, and now Roger Stone says, I'm a fan of RFK Jr. as I've interviewed him. He thinks his Fauci book, The Real Anthony Fauci, is a masterpiece, will go down in history as an important document when we get through World War III and manage to move forward. So he was contemplating what's going to happen, and here's his prediction. So first of all, Roger Stone predicted Michelle Obama will be the candidate for the Democrats, which I thought that for a while, but we'll see. I don't know. Maybe not. I mean, if it seems like it was a tough ride for her last time, but maybe. I mean, maybe. I'm not exactly on board with Roger Stone about that, but it could be. It could be. What he says in the end, though, is that RFK will get railroaded, will not make it anywhere, but Trump, when he gets the nomination, will reach across the aisle and complete a thing we mentioned here if the simulation does tend towards the most entertaining outcome, right? Remember the whole Q, which was totally fake. Q was 100% an operation to ensnare people who were likely to get ensnared in crazy stories. So the QAnon thing, right? It's the same as Blue Anon, right? So the QAnon thing, remember, QAnon believed, and this was fictitious from the start in order to get people associated with a crazy story, that JFK Jr. survived Hillary Clinton's attempt or Hillary Clinton's murder, right? That's the rumor. That's not what I'm saying, right? The idea is JFK Jr. was going to win. He was going to win the Senate seat that he was going to run against Hillary in the 2000 election for Senate, and he was going to win. And Hillary Clinton was not going to be the New York senator, and it was going to be JFK Jr. And then his plane crashed, right? So there are people. It's not what I'm saying. There is no proof of this, right? It's just another one of those, don't mess with the Clintons or you're finished, right? Now, there's some of those that seem true, that I seem to me true. Again, I'm not litigating these things and have not really looked in. And I was generally a fan of Bill Clinton, so this stuff would be, I was a kid, but these things would definitely shock me. But that's the world we're in. We're in a world of changing heroes and villains. So he's a guy that can go from hero to villain pretty quick, I think. And he's got enough other stuff out there that already makes him a villain, I think. But, just as far as skill and talent, you can never deny he is one of the most talented persuaders the world has ever met. I've said this a million times. You can't be alone in a room with Bill Clinton and keep your opinion. There's no way. There's no way. There's no way. You can't, not me, not you, not almost anyone can be left alone in a room with that man and walk out thinking the same thing they thought. That's how persuasive he is. Even everything I know about him, I don't think I could stay in a room and then leave the room with the same opinions. He is that powerful of a persuader and an influencer, which is how he won. It's a once in a lifetime talent as far as what he was good at, right? the whole QAnon myth was that JFK Jr. didn't die and that he has been around and is going to run with Trump to restore democracy, right? So they created this obviously fake and stupid story, but now it actually sows the foundation for what might happen, and Roger Stone predicts it, that Donald Trump, when he takes the nomination, will go for a heal the nation cross party ticket and will add RFK Jr. as the VP nominee. I said that here on the show first, not because I thought that was going to happen. I said that here 2 weeks ago, maybe. Why did I say it? I said because the simulation prefers the most entertaining outcome. I can't think of a more entertaining outcome than a Kennedy attached to a Trump ticket, which will bring along. I mean, there are enough Democrats that still believe in the Kennedy name, that still believe in that form of Democrat identity, right? That the Democrats can be a liberal force in the world, and so it will immediately take care of Trump's vaccination problem, because he has a vaccination problem. I think, my main reasons for not liking Trump right now and still supporting Vivek are that he didn't pardon Assange, he didn't pardon Snowden, and he didn't pardon Ross, and he didn't pardon all the people that were on his side, right, in the heroes and villains system, right? He didn't pardon the other heroes when he had a chance. And to me, that makes him a villain, right? If you don't pardon the other heroes when you could have, well, I get why he might have been afraid. I get the threats. I get it, right? But it sounds like in that same time he's contemplating pardoning Ross and Julian and Ed, he's also secretly hiding away the JFK murder stuff, right? And why did he do that? Maybe he's afraid. Maybe he knew. And he said to the judge Napolitano, or I can't say his name properly, he said right there that he says right there that anyway, I lost my train of thought on that. I was reading the comments for a second. Anyway, so the point is, RFK can really make the jump here. He's going to bring people over with him. He's going to bring a new crowd. He's going to add to Trump's viability, right? He can erase the vaccine problem, and he can actually erase this deep state problem too. That was the point I was trying to get at. The deep state problem Trump has with me is that he seemed to cow to them and be afraid. If you need someone who has nothing but courage when it comes to exposing the deep state, it's RFK. And he says this is an amazing interview. He did an interview with the Epoch Times, the Chinese newspaper funded by the Falun Gong, who are one of the most persecuted peoples in the world. And so he's doing this interview, and they ask RFK about, like, why are you doing this anyway? What is it? And he brought up a really interesting anecdote. He says, look, one of my last memories of with my dad before he was killed, was he was invited into the office of his dad, right, when his dad was running for president. So he must have been a little kid, right? And so his dad ended up handing him this book by Albert Camus called Virus or Plague. I don't remember what it's called in English, but it's like a pandemic, right? So the whole story is a town has a pandemic, and the story is really about the doctor who's told he's got to help people as part of his thing, but he doesn't know how. There's no cure. Anyone who goes in gets it and dies. And so he handed him this book, and RFK, was a kid, didn't really understand it, but read it many times in his life because the moment was so striking. He said his dad had a really a serious tone about handing him this book, and he knew the whole moment was important. And because it was one of the last things he did with his dad before his dad was assassinated by who knows who, Sirhan, they say, crazy. This sort of stuck with him, and he sort of studied the book in his whole life. And he says, now that I'm here, right, now that I'm here at this point, and he mentioned the Sisyphean, Sisyphus, the Greek god, the person who was punished by the Greek gods, who has to push the boulder up, and right when it gets to the top, it falls back. And he says, look, the Stoics actually think this guy is a hero because he gets to put his literal shoulder to the grindstone every day and work, and it feels good and satisfying. And what he says is that is what that book, that Camus book, meant to me in the end. And as I come to this point in my life, I see the work before me, and it pleases me to do it. And it made my whole life make sense, because my dad had, what the hell, this pandemic, and I'm a kid, and he was given this book about a pandemic and about what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to help, and you have a job in front of you and you're supposed to do it. A Greek king, yes, Greek king. Bitcoin Graffiti says Sisyphus is a Greek king, indeed. So what he says is, this is the job before me. It's not for money. It's not for fame. It's not for influence. He goes, who else can do the job to expose Fauci but me? I'm the only one who has the vantage point. This is stuff set up by my family. This is stuff that I had privileged knowledge of over my lifetime because of my position. And now I understand it better than anyone. And I can understand what's going on here better than anyone. And so I need to share it. And now they don't get into the Trump candidacy, but you can start to see that if Trump is a person capable of seeing across partisan lines and to be an original thinker, and to think out of the box. And there's plenty of viable Republican candidates, but I think he recognizes he has to reach across the aisle and try and unhypnotize some Democrats that are capable of being unhypnotized. And if there's anyone on earth, anyone who could do it, it's him. It's him. Right? It's RFK Jr. So we don't know what's going to happen. All kinds of things. Looking forward to the whole race in the Democrat Party. Should be interesting to watch them cheat and steal it from him. But there's a better outcome in the end involving him, and I'm here for it. So there you go. Now, if that's not enough, right? So heroes and villains changing, and who's on what side, and the topsy-turvy times we live in, and partisan change, and RFK could be a Republican, and again, heroes and villains flipping in everyone's mind. Here's an interesting one that no one saw coming, except people who watch this show, except people who come here and think about what's going on in Europe and China and Taiwan and America, and heroes and villains and what's going to happen. So this weekend, the French president, Macron, despite the trouble in his country, or perhaps because of the trouble in his country, went to China. And what happened in China? Well, he announced he needs to de-dollarize. So France is going to de-dollarize now. And he also said the following, that Europe, and France, of course, is a big part of Europe, and probably the most proud, and well, it's hard to say, they're all kind of proud. It's a very proud and self-aware place that is not interested in giving up its sovereignty, and never has in its history. And every time its sovereignty has been threatened, has lashed out and conquered and been, tough to deal with. Here they are saying now that they're going to reduce its dependency on the US and try to become a third superpower in the world. He said this in China, right? And he said he can do a lot of brokering between China and America. And I think that's true. And here's what War Clandestine says about it. Wow, in an unexpected turn, not really that unexpected. And remember, here's a little known fact, as someone who lived in France and follows French stuff pretty closely. Did you know that France left NATO years ago, right? France left NATO in the early 60s and didn't join NATO again until 2009. So they were not a NATO player. And because of that, they have their own military. They have their own aircraft carriers. They're not part of the F-35 boondoggle. They have the Rafale, which is its own jet, an excellent jet. And they did their own thing, right? And they legitimately are poised to be a third superpower based on energy, nuclear energy. They didn't care about what Greta thought about nuclear. They're not like Germany still today denying the role of nuclear power. They're way ahead on this stuff, and they're going to build more and more and more. The minute America abdicated its role in the Middle East, for example, and if you remember when America involved itself, this was right at the beginning of the Biden administration, America involved itself in a sale of French nuclear submarines to Australia. And America said, no, Australia's buying our submarines, right? And then at the last minute, France was left out of the lurch. And Macron seemed furious at the time. And the reason he was left out of the lurch, the logic the American military used is, well, how is he going to get his boats from France to Australia because we're not going to protect the seas around there anymore. And so good luck, Australia. You're probably never going to get shipment, which is a crazy thing to say, but it's true in the sense that America is no longer policing the seas as it once did because of capacity issues, not because it doesn't want to. It can't. It can't put the same amount of boats in the Middle East, in the Strait of Hormuz, over in China. It can't. It doesn't have the capacity anymore. So I think I'm not an expert of deployment of U.S. machines around the world, but that's my impression. And that was the argument they used to make sure that Australia didn't buy the submarines from France. What was France's response? It's a little historic anomaly, right? What they said was, and here's an interesting take. This has to do with the petrodollar. It has to do with everything. They said, all right, we can't sell our submarines to Australia. We're going to build nuclear reactors across France. What? How are they related? Well, they're related because that's France opting out of the petrodollar. That's France saying we're going to have our own energy systems. We're going to have all our own stuff. And that is really what you're seeing as of now. This weekend, you've got the G7, right, about to announce a nuclear power strategy amid energy security debates, which means they're going to create a agreement for G7 countries to embrace nuclear energy. Finally, we've been waiting for this for 50 years. 50 years we've been waiting for this announcement. But it's done. It looks like this G7 announcement will put to rest energy concerns in the Western world and will put to rest the reliance on the monopoly the Americans had with the energy market being priced in barrels of oil and US dollars. That's gone. It's just gone. There's no fanfare. It's gone. And the G7 will confirm it shortly. That's what I think, right? In the meantime, you've also got Iran that says we're out of the US dollar, right? Another one that's going to be selling energy for something else. And if you put that all together, right? If you start thinking of what's going on with France, realizing the writings on the wall here, Biden ain't the leader of the free world, right? He's not the leader of the free world anymore. Got to come up with a new plan. So he goes to China, right? And says things like we're going to establish a multipolar world, sounding exactly like Putin and Xi all of a sudden, right? So France all of a sudden sounding like that. Nations of the world are basically rejecting U.S. hegemony as the U.S. is pushing towards kinetic warfare. And now here's the big story, right? This weekend, with all that's going on in Taiwan, Americans met him. It looks like, and this is a war clandestine prediction, Macron leaves Beijing. We're going to get to what the Taiwan part. Leaves Beijing adamant that Europe should not allow the U.S. agenda to dictate their fate. Militaristically speaking, the U.S. just lost their second strongest ally should kinetic World War III break out, and the rest of Europe might follow France's lead. Huge win for humanity. With ongoing military escalations in Taiwan, it appears Xi is ensuring neutrality from Europe before he moves into Taiwan, which Biden claims the U.S. would defend with military force. Xi wants to move into Taiwan and does not want it to escalate into a full-scale World War III. Something else of significance is Xi appeared to get visibly annoyed when Macron and von der Leyen continued to blame China and Russia in the conflict of Ukraine. Xi put his foot down behind closed doors and made Macron recognize the U.S. as instigators, which he did, right? Based on Macron and Xi's dialogue, it seems all but certain that China will move into Taiwan. Xi is very unhappy with U.S. control of Taiwan via proxy. If we apply the transitive property from Ukraine to Taiwan, there is likely offshore U.S. deep state activity in Taiwan. Definitely. Not likely, definitely. If you have been following me for any period of time, you already know what I think this is ultimately about, U.S. biological activity. According to the U.S. NIH, there are 1,251 biolabs in Taiwan, an island approximately the size of Maryland. But as it stands today, Xi just told Europe via Macron to stand down for when China moves into Taiwan. The U.S. aren't the good guys they claim to be. China and Russia want the U.S. away from their borders, and Europe need not get in the way. It's coming to an end. And look, this is the heroes and villains switching, guys. This is it. This is what it looks like, right? Now, the prediction I have is America can't. It's not sending anyone to Ukraine. We're not going to Taiwan. You had Lindsey Graham today. Oh, we're going to defend Taiwan. No, we're not. No, we're not. Like, even if the microchips are there, we're not defending. We can't. It's not a question of do it. We cannot. And if you look at the MMA crowd, right? If America goes to war, the MMA crowd has to be pro-war. They have to be. Where are you going to get your fighters from? I don't mean that MMA fighters are fighting. I mean the people who would watch MMA in general are the guys who are going to line up and volunteer if there's another 9/11. They're not showing up to this fight, guys. There's no MAGA Republican. It's just urban Democrats. If you look at the islands that make up the voting blocks in America, right, you see that it's the urban centers that all vote Democrat, and they're not producing an army that can go to Taiwan. Not even close. They're worried about their social media influencers that are hired by the White House. They're not going to war. It's the country boys, the rural people that have always gone to these battles. And I mean, I don't have actual numbers, but my impression is rural Americans make up, rural uneducated young men make up the bulk of the military draft or the military, not draft, but recruitment, right? They're recruitment. So the Democrats have told me my whole life, right? They all go to the poor, stupid people in the South, and that's their only job, and this and that. So in the end, if you listen to what's going on at the MMA fight, that should be an indication of American appetite for war. It's not going to happen. Now, it doesn't mean we get rid of conflict. It just means that things turn internally even more. The weaker the U.S. is abroad, the more people are going to try and fight internally. That's what I think, right? The minute the Biden administration is embarrassed abroad, they tend to take it out domestically. And you saw that with the this is great. You know, the John Kirby now being called the Baghdad. What was the comedian? Comedy Ali, comedic Ali. What was his name again from the Baghdad? Remember the comms guy for Saddam Hussein. We're gonna win in Comical Ali, right? I think that was his name. John Kirby now did the same thing this weekend. We didn't lose billions of dollars of machinery when we left Afghanistan. Of course you did. Yeah, Baghdad Bob. Yeah, Baghdad. Wasn't Comical Ali one of them too? Ali, yeah, Comical Ali. Anyway, Baghdad Bob. So the U.S. guy looks exactly the same, just totally, and he's got all these weird body language things. We didn't lose billions of dollars. We didn't do that, right? No. But of course they did, and so the idea of laughing at these guys always turns back into America. You had that in the failed Afghan pullout, right? You had all kinds of repercussions domestically. So here, if you add economic woes, if you add other countries not wanting to involve themselves in the American system and the change that's going on in America, if people no longer think the U.S. military is the right horse to back, you're going to get this kind of change. And we're in it. We're in the middle of it right now. And heroes and villains are switching real quick. And that's why we call this the breakup, right? Americans' own idea of themselves and their nationalism and their patriotism is changing. It doesn't mean there's things we love that we have to get rid of. There are just certain assumptions about America that have to be paused for the time being for us to get back on track. And part of that is to say, well, like a change in the US dollar is probably good for Americans. It's not about pushing the same system we had with US as reserve currency forever. There's a million drawbacks to the US being the reserve currency. We've seen it in the manufacturing base. We've seen it in all the hollowing out of American manufacturing. It's better for Americans in general, not as good for financial engineers in Silicon Valley and Wall Street, but better for Americans. So change is afoot, guys. Change is afoot. It was a big weekend where I believe we're in the new world already. Let me read some comments, see what's up with you guys. That was a little bit, a lot of stories we got to. Yeah, let's start here. 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 Let's start Yeah, that's the decimated. Yeah, I thought decimated was one. I thought decimated was reduced to no. Yeah, it's reduced by 1/10. Is an endless sword of Moscow. The Journal de Mort. Yeah, yeah. I can't. I can't read that. That rag has always been victory. Yeah, may we, of course. Waldorf education considers the self-drive as one of the senses. Yeah, yeah. It's a big one, and it's going to be cultivated more and more. That's the game. Yeah. On decimate. Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, remove 1 out of every 10. Yeah, yeah. It was like a thing for the army. Yeah, I couldn't watch the latest Star Wars. It's so bad. Yeah, I gave them a pass on that first one, being like a retread. But after that, it's awful. It's unwatchable, unwatchable, unwatchable. Ban the game, not woke enough. Yeah, go Disney. Yeah, make all the shitty movies you can, Disney. Let's do it. Because these things, see, the thing that's awesome is they can lose so much on one bad bet that it can cripple them forever. So let's keep. I mean, because it's a rough business, right? It's a rough business. New deep throat lurking inside the CIA. Yep, that's what it looks like to me, which is great. Let's focus on our side of the equation instead of attacking others. It seems like we're witnessing the creation of a new movement, Bitcoinism, which encompassing the perfect trifecta. Yep. Yeah. Breaker and deal maker. Yep. The CIA breaker and the deal maker. I love that. That's a good. I'm gonna make that a title when that starts coming to fruition. Trump said the judge, if you saw, yeah, that's what it was. If you saw what I saw, you wouldn't release it too, which goes to my theory that he's worried about his family and him. Understandable. Look, I get it. I get it. I get it. But it's a little too late. He's a little too far down the road. Just watch Crichton's Andromeda Strain last night. It's amazing. Huh? Yeah. What a mind. He was working as a doctor when he wrote that. That's what got him out of being a doctor. And that's where he had the idea to make ER, which is where he made his real money. And he's like a giant too. He's like 6'10" or something. Huh? Crazy. Greek king. Yeah, that was the Sisyphus. The emperor rules the entire empire, while kings or queens rule smaller kingdoms within the empire. Yeah. Macron was very close to Brazilian president and tried to get along with Putin despite the war. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Yeah. And Lula, look, calling for peace. I think that election was stolen, but I don't know. Just that's what I heard from Glenn Greenwald and others. And Glenn Greenwald is a Lula fan, so that's kind of why I thought it was credible, but I don't know. Looked like it to me. Yeah, that's something that I think would give a lot of people pause as well. Just talking to Biden is proof that things are out of control in America. Taiwan will defend itself fiercely. I think so. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Look, I'm not here to promote the CCP at all, right? Like I want them to befall. I want worse things for them than Biden. I think. I mean, they seem more cruel. So should be city states, so they don't control rural state politics. Yeah, but the problem with American federalism is they'll get their fucking senators. We don't need an increase of senators in the United States. That would be bad. If hyperinflation hits U.S. before China kicks U.S. out of Taiwan, then U.S. guy is a poor schmuck who has no choice but to go to another meaningless war. You think so? I don't know. I think so. What you're saying is, and I believe this. One of the bets that people would have against America right now is that Americans can't go without being consumers, and that taking away their wealth for consumption would force them into war. I think Americans would get back to reality if that happened. They would lose weight and learn how to go without quicker than they would go to war. Now, Bushmaster, you might be right. You might be right. I think there are some people who could be goaded into that. The problem is they've called those people racist for years, and I think there's a lot of desperate people, desperate men and desperate women who would normally go and fight, but they're already desperate, right? Taiwan won't make them more desperate. So I think like 60-40, I think Americans don't show up. But maybe I'm wrong. Tend to take China's side on the Taiwan issue. Yeah, that's another thing. Love the show. Great with us. Thanks, Darsab. I love it. Some days I wish you didn't have enough content to fill an hour every day, but the insanity is going to happen. I'm glad you're reporting it all. uh, uh. Oh, was it filtered out of spam? I'll put it up again to make sure. Make sure I have it here. Oh yeah, there it is. This is what he said, guys, in case it was spammed out. Yeah, crazy. Okay, good. All right. Okay, team. Showed on the screen, but the chat hasn't on. Look, those mother effers do it all the time, so we don't need to catch them every time. All right, team. Peace. Let me put a good one on. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow.